Joining us now to break down the U.S. recovery efforts is Alfredo Ortiz, the CEO of the Job Creators Network. Alfredo, when we look at what's going on right now, it seems like we are at least getting a glimpse of a possible V-type recovery. Of course, it's a little too early to say that right now, but acknowledging what we're seeing right now, do you think that lawmakers should move forward with another relief bill, or should we wait and see what happens first?
Well, one of the biggest reasons, by the way, that we're seeing this kind of a recovery is because we had such a strong economy going into this COVID crisis. Remember, just a few months ago, we had 3.5% unemployment. We had about 7.5 million unfilled jobs. So we had an extremely strong and healthy economy. And that's why I think we're seeing this kind of recovery. But I think right now, I think the idea that Mitch McConnell and others in the White House have of let's just see a little bit in terms of what the impact is of what has already been spent. I think that's a good idea. But I do believe that we need to move forward quickly on a payroll tax cut, and something that we've been advocating pretty much since day one.
And I think that's a good point, too. It's important to remember that we did turn off this economy. I use that term because I don't want people to confuse this with prior recessions or anything like that, where it was a more cyclical type of thing that does happen with economies. This was something that we made a willing decision to do, and it should suggest that we should have more of a say in turning it back on. So I hope that you're right when we say this. But looking at
that's right. By the way, I share that sentiment. I call it a situational recession, not a systemic recession. We did turn this economy off, and so we do have to recognize that. You're right.
And I also think it's important to note that the reason why we were able to come in some of the numbers from coronavirus is because Americans were willing to listen to the government very early on. They trusted the public health officials, and they took very severe measures, something that we've never seen before in this country. The American people did it. They did so despite some hardships to their own financial pockets, and now they're looking to get back to work. So looking at what we can do right now, what should we be doing? You bring up the payroll program right there. I think that the PPP program was also very successful in making sure that these people are able to get back to work quickly, since they were able to keep some people on their payroll. What can we learn about this situation to help us for possibly another second wave?
Yeah, that's a great point. Remember that a lot of these folks weren't actually unemployed per se. They were really furloughed. And the PPP program, the Paycheck Protection Program, really is what allowed that. It was a record $511 billion has really been given out. Most of that, I believe, is going to really convert into that grant, just as the way it was laid out. And just recently, there were fixes and changes to that were just signed into law just a couple days ago, really, by the president, that's making that 8-week go to 24 weeks in terms of getting payrolls back to that normal part, which is a huge piece, and also adding a little bit more flexibility in how much can be spent on rent and other items outside of payroll. That went from 75% down to 60%. So that's really been an amazing or an amazing outcome of this product. Remember, there were about 50 million people that were able to keep their jobs because of that Paycheck Protection Program, based on the latest estimates. Again, $511 billion given out by the government, literally in record time. But right now, what I think we need to look at, part of it is, and you mentioned this already, Americans did what they had to do in terms of to flatten the curve.
Right.
We've actually just launched a program called Flatten the Fear, because we're concerned that really right now the liberal media and the media, frankly, on the left is just giving a one-sided view of the data. We want to make sure that Americans have all the data at their disposal so that they can make educated decisions on their own and not just be fed a one-sided story. And that's what we're concerned about. That's what Flatten the Fear is about, so that we can allow Americans to feel safe, to feel good and comfortable, again, about going out. Because when you look at those stats, it clearly shows this was a virus and really an epidemic that really has hit our most vulnerable in terms of the elderly, the 65 and over. In fact, about 80% of the deaths really fall into that category. So we got to remind folks that it really is, especially now with the protocols, by the way, that by different industries and states are putting out there, it really isn't what it was when we first found out about this virus. And so that's what Flatten the Fear campaign is about. But again, in terms of different elements, the Paycheck Protection Program, finishing that out is a big part of that. But that payroll tax cut, we need to do that. Remember, that's 7.5% for the employee and the employer. And by the way, for those who are independent contractors who actually have to cover both sides of that, that's 15% back in their pockets.
And I think that's a really important point, too, because even if Americans are still fearful as things begin reopening, that still might result in more anemic growth. I mean, we want people to feel comfortable going out to restaurants, movie theaters, even back to their own workplaces.
That's right.
I think that if we do get rid of the fear, but at the same time do educate them on how we can prevent those vulnerable populations that you were just talking about, specifically when it comes to our nation's nursing homes, too. I mean, that's where a lot of the deaths have taken place.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and it's not a binary choice. I mean, you can educate the people on how to be safe while at the same time trying to bring them back to prosperity. And I think that's the point we're at right now. Alfredo Ortiz, I
Yeah.
really appreciate you coming on tonight, breaking down this issue for us. Thank you.